According to Rank Tracker, in 2024, 61% of marketers in the financial sector identified SEO as their top inbound marketing priority. This underscores and heightens the competition for visibility in personal finance results. But here's the challenge. Financial SEO requires specialized knowledge, content must be balanced, accuracy with accessibility, technical terms need to be clear explanations. How can financial sites build authority while maintaining user engagement in a new world of AI search? This is the Voice of Search podcast. My name is Tyson, and joining us today is Zach Lee, US General Manager at Finder. Finder helps consumers make better financial decisions through comparison tools. Zach and I will share how to optimize financial content both for search engines and everyday users. Zach, welcome to the podcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was looking forward to the conversation because obviously there's a lot going on, a lot of change, but I feel like you're in one of these like highly competitive, like one of the top arenas, I would say, for like SEO. And so like maybe before we get in too far, like how are you viewing like some of the recent changes in search? Like how is it affecting kind of like your day to day?
So you're totally right. I think any category that is in the YL space is extremely competitive. Finance is no exception. I've always sort of referred to it as like the NBA of SEO. There's like where it's dominated by like a few players, and then there's the rest of the league trying to sort of win where we can. And it's only getting more competitive, but at the same time, I'm really encouraged by the opportunity that AI might present for a bit of a reset in terms of visibility. I think since the HCU, we've seen a lot of our traffic just broadly across the spectrum has gone away. There was this guidance we've gotten from Google about people first content. And all the things you sort of need to do, scaled content, don't do any scaled content abuse to sort of recover, and none of that's panned out. And so it kind of feels like the industry's been in a bit of a holding pattern for the last 3 years. And so AI might be this opportunity for a few folks to break out of it. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's super refreshing because most of the time in a lot of conversations, you're just kind of surrounded by this like doom and gloom. There's a lot of fear going on right now, a lot of uncertainty. And so I feel like it's a little refreshing to hear some optimism, especially in like such a competitive and like you said, it's one of the, really dominated sectors by a few players. Maybe if you can elaborate a little bit more on like how that's giving you this optimism, like where you're seeing these angles for others to compete.
So, well, to set some context, I did a bit of an analysis a few weeks ago about SERP diversity. And so when I looked at that, the top like 10 terms, like, best car insurance, best personal loans, best credit cards, providers actually accounted for the majority of that. If we're not counting SERP features, providers accounted for the majority of that. And then content sites only accounted for about 23% of the results that showed up. When you remove NerdWallet, Bankrate, Forbes, that number goes down to 3%. So it really wasn't much, optimism for the last few years anyways. And now it's sort of a resetting of the playing field. In that these smaller publishers now have tools, they have new channels. Google does dominate 90% of the search market, but ChatGPT is like quickly gaining and people's user behavior is changing. And I think with zero-click search, it actually is going to present an opportunity for someone who doesn't necessarily have the most backlinks to win, but actually someone who's catering to the user the most, someone who's being as user-centric as possible, creating great, memorable experiences, because they're going to get all of that informational content, information from the AIOs and the generative AI. but the actual on-page experience is going to be the sort of difference maker here, and I don't think anyone has a monopoly on that right now.
It's such a great point. And as you were like describing that as a little bit of like kind of a light bulb moment in the sense is we've seen over the last, I don't know, call it 3 to 5 years. And it's like Rand's been, one of the people banging the drum on this is although more and more users, like there's more searches than ever on Google, and there is more traffic leaving Google, like Google being a referral source, but that traffic is being kind of taken by a smaller group of players. And I think like, and I mean, this is me going a little bit on a limb, but I feel like there's a component of that that probably ties into some like consumer behavior element where Google's rewarding through nav boost engagement metrics. If someone's familiar with a brand or a company, they're probably going to be more likely to click on it. Hence, that just further amplifies this kind of piece. Where if you're not having that, user engagement metric as far as like that click through, the CTR of going to a site, you don't really have that in AI search or LLMs. So then it's like it is in some ways kind of like leveling, that playing field.
Yes, completely agree. I think we know at this point that Google uses Chrome data to determine, to monitor clicks, and it uses like how long you hover over a SERP and like all of those sort of user metrics. And it created a cumulative advantage, right? So like it was almost a winner take all system where if you were on P1, of course you were going to have more clicks, and of course you were going to have better user engagement than someone who doesn't have any authority writing a best credit cards article, who doesn't even get seen unless someone goes directly to their website. So this sort of breaks us out of that a bit. Don't get me wrong, I still think backlinks are going to be incredibly important, and I actually think mentions are going to be just as important going forward, especially for LLMs. As far as I know, ChatGPT and Claude and all of them don't have access to Chrome data. So I do think this is one of those moments where what we're going to see a shuffling of the deck. Yeah.
Interesting. And maybe if you can elaborate a little bit more on kind of how you're taking this into, your approach. I mean, you don't have to kind of give the playbook as far as your strategy, but maybe like a little bit of like how do these shifts change your perspective on strategy or even prioritization of efforts in kind of this new age of search?
So I know at Finder, we're sort of embracing the search everywhere optimization line that Rand Fishkin had said at one point, where it's more about the multimodal success. So it's not just about being on search, it's about being wherever your audience is. So that's being on YouTube, that's being on social, that's being in forum sites, that's making sure that our content is human and authentic and feels real in a way that I think the sort of generic internet of the last 10 years sort of robbed us of. And so now, Finder is trying to, look for these pockets of opportunity that these bigger sites haven't said. So we're playing a lot in the long tail. We're doing, because I guess like, if I'm going to speak more plainly, as people used to search for what they really, people couldn't really search for what they really wanted on Google, right? The more specific your term, the less helpful the results you would get. So and it sort of forced us all into this keyword backed way of using the internet, right? So instead of saying best credit cards for someone who lives in Brooklyn, whose car just broke down, and get as nuanced as you can, you had to just say best credit cards, right? Or maybe you add one other qualifier to that. But AI and these LLMs, they're actually catering to the very specific needs of what the user actually wants. You finally can say, I want the best credit card for the person who lives in Brooklyn whose car just broke down. And Finder's playing in those spaces. We are creating content for the very specific use case of this one user who needs that cash advance app to connect to that one bank. We're playing wherever we can to actually cater to real issues instead of doing the broad generic sort of best and then just the head term way of SEO that we used to see in the past.
Interesting. So it's like, I mean, in some ways, for a while in SEO, we've been kind of doing this like consolidation, holistic, like super long pages with that tries to fill every possible expectation from the user around like that topic, because then it's a safe bet for a search engine to send to you. Where now we can kind of be more granular, less focus on that kind of, hey, we need authority from this one page versus the kind of like heightened relevancy of the specific nuance that may be included in a longer prompt than a typical query, or in a series of prompts that have like this historical component, which is like, I think one of also like the challenges in how we look at and like how we measure SEO is because like I've really been questioning like how much value do you have in like looking at rankings or like some of the more traditional performance metrics when there's going to be so many more variations of how people will ask a question when you lengthen that question.
Mhm. It's I mean, there's a couple companies that have come out. I mean, you see people like Profound and Ahrefs is building this like sort of brand monitor. So there's a lot of folks attempting to do it. I mean, I saw some hacks on in GSC where if you just type the word reply as to, the query contains, then you can see a lot of what folks have typed in AI mode. But it is one of those things that is going to be hard to track, and we may never be able to track it because there's an infinite amount of queries. You could probably group them semantically, like these sort of searches are all sort of the same, which was probably what people will do. And I think as a result of that, people will create pages that sort of approach the full funnel, the sort of the same way that people walk themselves down the funnel when they're using LLMs, where they start with what they want and then they keep clarifying till they get what they want. And I think that's also, just a side note, why the quality of the lead is higher when people do eventually click out, is because they've walked themselves all the way down the funnel. But I think it's just about, again, I need to go back to the about being everywhere. Like, I think how people consume information is changing, and so the way we used to do things of, do I rank P1 for this, or do I rank P2 for that? It's going to be like, do I have a YouTube video on this? So it's going to almost be more about the input metrics. Have I covered this on social? Have I covered this on YouTube? Is my audience replying to me? Are they commenting on my stuff? Like, it's going to be about the impact you make. And I think we're going to watch our KPIs change, and we're going to see a lot of conversations, I think, happening internally at companies with stakeholders especially within the SEO community, to say like, hey, this is how we need to measure success going forward. It's no longer going to be the whole traffic number, or the, whatever it was, or clicks, but it's going to be the quality and the, user engagement. I think that's ultimately going to be, how we measure success going forward.
And with like kind of that, like, quality of click or quality of user coming to the site, like, have you been finding like with your, finder that the traffic you're getting from whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, whoever, have you noticed like a difference in quality of leads coming in?
Definitely. So the volume is significantly less, but the quality of that volume is significantly higher. So, we might have a page that gets like 100 clicks and it's from ChatGPT, and of those 100, maybe 50 of them end up doing an action on the site. So it's like much, much higher conversion. You scale those numbers out, we'll see what that conversion rate looks like. If you were with 1,000 or 10,000 clicks, but we are seeing that, and I do think it's because these folks are closer to the decision stage than they would be if they had just clicked on a blue link from a generic sort of keyword.
Interesting. Now, kind of, I guess it's somewhat tactical still, but in terms of like mobilizing the organization around this, because like you mentioned, within your organization, you're looking at it of where is the user. It's not just Google. It's a more holistic in the sense of like, not strictly just Google search. How, like, what was the process to kind of get everybody aligned and on the same page? Because I think that's one of the other challenges that SEOs are facing is the narrative that we've been saying for a while has shifted. And then now they're thinking, or we are thinking, how do we kind of like steer this ship back into this other direction when we were pushing everyone to care about rankings and care about these like items?
So I think a lot, and you're seeing a lot on LinkedIn, but just showing folks that bifurcation of the clicks and impressions in Google Search Console is a really good way to sort of highlight the stakes and the direction that the industry is moving. So, and again, if you're working in an YMYL category and you aren't one of the big guys, you've been looking for a way out for a long time, and so I don't think it didn't take much convincing, I'll say, at least in Finder in the US, because we're hungry. Like we're ready. We really do care about our readers and we want to make sure we're delivering the best product possible for them. And it's not always a great experience when you put a lot of work and effort into creating something and then no one sees it. And now we're like, okay, well now we're on YouTube and we're getting some good feedback there, and now we're on Instagram and we're getting some good feedback there, and so now we have a newsletter and we have this one-to-one direct relationship with our audience. And so I think if you approach it from a place of like what your purpose is, like what your vision for the company is outside of like ranking, all of that stuff sort of doesn't matter because it's not about the activity, it's about what you get out of doing the activities.
Yeah, and in some ways too, I feel like part of the challenge or battle that we've had in SEO is like we've, and not everybody, but like a large portion of the SEO community has been like trying to speak to SEO in SEO jargon and in our own terms, in which case it alienates those that are not familiar with it, which is typically the executive leadership group.
Yeah.
So then there's this kind of like, I don't want to say resentment, but a little bit of resentment on
Yeah.
like having that recognition. And I feel the way that you're describing that also has a natural way that makes probably the topic or search in general more approachable from a broader audience. Where I think an executive could hear what you just said. I mean, it helps you're a GM, but like someone that's not as close to the industry could hear that and be like, yep, okay, that makes sense. Where before it was maybe a little like the barrier to entry from the other side was a bit higher.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's one thing I've always sort of disliked and liked. I'm a huge nerd, obviously, but like the over sort of intellectualization of SEO, and you can't really walk into these meetings with folks who are not nerdy SEOs and start talking about query fan out technique or n-grams or semantic matches and content chunk and what is it, chunking. There's a new one about chunking, and so it's like, and that also takes the spirit, the heart out of a lot of this stuff. It's like you've moved back into a mindset where you're trying to hack a system versus create a good product. And going to someone who's not technical, or going to the CFO and say, I'm going to hack the system, and then you start throwing jargon at them, they're going to be like, hold on, do we actually need your department? Like, but if you tell them I'm going to create something that our customers love and that adds up to our conversion rate and it's a part of the funnel, like they'll understand that and they'll be really on board. And then internally in your Slacks and in your team's messages, you can start talking about the fan out techniques and n-grams. But on the surface, I think just speaking to people like people is the way. Yeah.
How, I mean, this is a little bit of a tangent, but like, what stage of your career did you start to like really realize that and feel that? Because I feel like there's a natural kind of arc of someone that's like newer into the industry. You get really excited about learning this jargon that maybe you didn't know before. And then you're speaking to others and you're like, why don't they care the same as me? And then
Yeah.
you're like, okay, and you kind of start changing it. Like, where were you? Like, how did you kind of make that mindset shift?
So I had the luxury, I guess, of being a PM, like have building apps and stuff beforehand, before I got really into SEO. And so talking to devs is the same way. And so like learning to get engineers to sort of talk in a more human way, I think prepared me for it. But I think, when it really hit me that you couldn't sort of present things that way is when, and it's the simplest thing ever, you start talking in that way and then they point to a result on Google and say that, okay, then why isn't it working? And you're like, oh, like it kind of puts things in perspective for you. And a lot of it is, good. It's good hygiene. I love structured data. It's great for accessibility, people who need readers and all of that. And technical SEO is probably more important than it ever has been before. But it a lot of it just comes down to links and brand awareness and, click metrics, as we spoke about earlier. And so and a lot of those, and I think we were talking about EAT before we started recording, which is not a direct ranking factor, but it's the human element, right? It's something where you are going to trust the information more if it's written by an expert or reviewed by an expert, and because of that, they're probably more likely to click on your affiliate link or use your tool or whatever. So all of it leads back to just thinking like a regular human. Like, are you going to go with the insurance company that you've never seen before, or the one that Are you going to click on this affiliate link from this site that is just nothing but buttons, or are you going to go to the one that has some content that provides context around it? Like, the more you think like a human, the more user-centric you are, the more value you add to actual people, I think the more you'll be rewarded. And naturally, as a result of that, you'll start to rise in visibility.
Absolutely. So we've hit on, a fair amount of like, these changes, and we're talking about like positioning to it. How do you see like more of the role of the SEO? So like we've kind of hit on how they're like communicating it and kind of some of the fundamental strategies towards it, but like what's next for the SEO manager and like the function?
I think the function of the SEO is going to be more of a growth manager. It's not going to be someone who, depending on the company, it may focus primarily on organic, free traffic, high margin traffic, but it's not going to be constrained to Google. I think it's going to, or Google search, because YouTube, it'll be on YouTube, it'll be on Google, it'll be on Instagram, it'll be on TikTok. It'll really be about being the performance manager for everything. And I think it's actually going to become more of a brand focused role more than anything. I think performance is still going to play a big role in it, but it's going to be more about your entity management, right? Is your brand being associated with the right products? Are you getting the right links, and how are you getting them? It doesn't necessarily matter. You could, because GPT and all these LLMs understand mentions, and that's how they build their entity and not links. It's not necessarily about your website getting backlinks to it. It's about, so and so Tyson Stockton of Previsible, and a set on TikTok that SEO is not dead, and right, and so now they know Tyson Stockton and they know Previsible, and it's not because it was said on your website or even another whatever. It was because you said it on TikTok, right? And sorry, I was a bit incoherent, but it's like it's building that web of entity, I think. Yeah.
No, I'm with you on it, and I'm also I appreciate the kind of within the same answer in the same sentence, you hit the executive speak, and like you had like brand recognition and entity recognition in the same piece, which I appreciate. And I think like I was actually just in a conversation with a client the other day where they were asking about, and like a lot of people, they were worried, hey, our clicks are down, our impressions are up. It was like, yeah, that's from a glossary directory, like no real surprises in that sense. And then the question was like, okay, like what's going on with leads? Like, has that changed during this? Answer was no. So in case that was a piece, but then the conversation led into like, well, how should we be looking at this channel then? If before we were measuring success on impressions, clicks, leads, the floor just got knocked out on a couple of them. How do we look at that? And like one of the pieces that I came back with was actually on the brand piece, where, I kind of use the analogy. I was like, if you have a billboard, you're not going to see that impression count. Like you might have a generic thing from when you purchased it, but you're expecting then that direct traffic. And so I think like as SEOs, we need to start looking, and sure, we can't claim all of the direct traffic, but I think like we do need to use how much our direct traffic is fluctuating as a little bit of a proxy of how well we're doing being present in AIOs and ChatGPT and these other ones, regardless if it's sending traffic or not.
Oh, totally. And also how you're capturing that traffic and retaining that traffic. because there's a less, the ocean got a little smaller in terms of the volume that can be sent to websites. When someone does come to your site, really like hammer home that the experience is really well, and on their, and get them into a newsletter, get them into a membership flow, get them into your ecosystem in some way, ask them to follow you on this channel or to subscribe to your YouTube or to, whatever it is. But you want to make sure that you're capturing them, because before, if you ranked for the keyword, it was almost like you owned a search, right? You owned the real estate of people searching that. But we don't own it the same way anymore. It's never been more clear that we're renting our traffic from these platforms. And so when you do get them onto your site, for that brief period of time, you do own that user. Capture them, keep them, find a way to reactivate them again and again and again, so you're not so dependent on all of these platforms.
Interesting. With as you're saying that too, I was thinking like I've always told people like as SEOs we cannot be successful on our own. Like we require the dev and engineering team, we require analytics, we require all these partners. I feel like as you're describing that, it's like almost like we need to shift some of that efforts towards partnering with other marketing channels, which before we've kind of just been resentful of like, hey, they get more budget than us. But now it's more like, hey, we probably need to be working hand in hand with the social teams, with the, affiliate teams, whoever, because it's going to have that kind of intertwined impact.
100%. I think, one of the reasons, and I'm sure this is the same with you, is that SEO scratches every itch, right? It allows you to be really technical, and it also allows you to be creative, and it allows you to touch really every part of the business in some way, shape, or form. And that's, still the case, if not more so. And I also think there's a little bit less dependency on other departments than there were before. ChatGPT does enable you to do a lot of technical work. Allows you to build things quickly. You don't ship something that has like a secret API key or anything like that, but like you can build a proof of concept and pass that on to your product team now, or you can create a marketing plan or something and then pass it on to PR, and you can, articulate the vision so much more quickly and accurately. And I don't know. I think the SEO is going to become one of the most important roles. It might not be called an SEO. It might be called something with the word growth in it, or it might be called just a digital marketer. But it is going to be sort of the role that brings it all together, because distribution is the most. As someone who's shipped many failed products, it's distribution is one of the most important things that you can think about, and the SEO is distribution in a nutshell.
Well said. I feel like that's a great way to kind of like encapsulate a lot of this conversation where, it's the pendulum is swinging a little bit. Like we have to broaden the perspective of it and kind of take that step back to then be more strategic in how we're competing. But it's like, I also, just going back to the beginning of the conversation, I love that you're advocating for some more optimism of like, hey, especially in these like David versus Goliath categories, like you have a new playing field. And, I think that like something else in addition is it typically takes a lot more to change direction of how we're talking about in a large Fortune 500 enterprise versus the smaller, nimble company. And if you're able to move quickly, align the company quickly, you will have an upper hand on these larger organizations that struggle to make significant changes because of just the bureaucracy that exists within it.
Totally. I mean, it's like a meme out there right now that's like social media managers talking about how many layers of approval they have to go through, and by the time they get the yes, the trend is no longer relevant. So I think smaller orgs do have a strong advantage right now, because those, like you said, those big companies, to even shift it a degree to the right takes a long time, whereas small and medium-sized publishers can shift on a dime and really see impact and get those learnings as quickly as possible. The one thing I really think about a lot is that and what I would caution though to these smaller publishers is to not put all of your chips in trying to win citations on Google. I think the value exchange between the creator and Google has never been more imbalanced right now. And so you may use chunking and, n-grams and semantic, well, whatever, to get to, being cited in the AIO, but you can't pay your bills with impressions. And so figure out where you can add the most value. You still want traffic, you still want all that, but diversify your streams. And I think teaching people that Google is just one stream, or maybe it's a river, right? But it's not the ocean anymore. And so use all of everything you've learned as being like a marketing scientist and apply that to these other channels. I'm really excited to see what happens when people with traditional SEO backgrounds break into social, and when they break into video. I think they're gonna, shift the industry on its head, because these are real geniuses. A lot of them, like a lot of people in this industry, you have to have a really generalist sort of set of skills, which in a world of specialists is kind of rare. So I really am excited to see how we approach this, but I would just caution: don't put all of your chips just in the single Google basket. It's not that's not where we are anymore.
Yeah, and like to that point, I think as SEOs, we are very well equipped for this. Yeah. And as I don't know, as fearful as some people may be, it's like, I mean, at least for myself, like that's what attracted me to search, was the fast pace, the complexity. It's not straightforward. It's like the other things to me were a little more boring, because it was like quite linear, a bit more simplistic. And the same things that I think attracted a lot of us to the industry is also going to be the same characteristics that will set us up for success in this area. And I feel like in that same David with Goliath, like we should be able to move quicker to adapt to these changes as you've been working within it. It's like it's been there, just hasn't been as visible as it is now.
Oh, totally. And one thing I'll say is, like, outside of engineers, SEOs, I feel like they're the group that's used AI the most. Outside of engineers, and people who use it as their therapist, which I think is like the leading cause or reason, use that, according to Harvard. But like, we've really used it because our business depends on it, right? Like, our traffic is our business, and so when it came out, we were trying to crack it immediately and using it to automate workflows and to generate schema and to do a lot of the busy work that that comes with doing SEO. Uploading articles is one thing that is always, sort of a pain, and it's monotonous. And so we were like, all right, we'll just start forward. I'll get ChatGPT to give me all the HTML. I'll give ChatGPT to give me the schema markup. I'll give, and so we're kind of ahead of the curve, and I think continue to lean into AI to make the workflow easier. It creates the space to do more multi-channel activity. And I think I would, for the SEOs who are working with editorial teams of like content focused companies, I would say ask them to lean into it as well, and how to use it, and how to get it to augment some of the BAU that they do that's not necessarily moving the needle. And also, another thing is, because editorial roles and SEO roles are so hand in hand, I think one thing that's also going to shift is that editorial roles are now going to be very high visibility, or they have to be. Like, I don't think because you're a great writer anymore doesn't necessarily have the impact it used to when it comes to sort of writing this type of content. Like, they're still going to be like the ones who are winning on Substack and all these newsletter platforms. But for SEO content, never has it been more important to demonstrate human effort. And so to have an editor that is active on social as well, building their own personal brand, being more of a creator, almost like an editor-creator hybrid role, is going to be, I think, what plays the best in the future.
Which I have to double back. Is that actually like the thing? Is Harvard said that the therapy?
Yeah, they did.
Number one.
They did.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's good. People are getting more help, but also feels a little
scary
concerning at the same time.
Very concerning.
Well, on that note, though, we're gonna move into the lightning round here. and I'm going to throw a series of kind of more shorter form questions at you. Um, each one will have its own theme, and then we'll kind of riff on it and then kind of jump to the next one. So, first question we have is a buy or sell. And so, are you buying or selling that financial literacy content will outperform product comparison pages for personal finance sites in 2025?
I am selling that financial literacy will outperform comparison. I think the only place where I see financial literacy outperforming comparison would be in video or on social. But for actual learning, text-based learning, I think LLMs will do a fantastic job at helping educate folks.
And in that same vein, though, so with that happening within LLMs, like, would you still be looking for that placement and that kind of like billboard exposure from it? Or would you just be like, limited resources, pick another route?
A little of both. I definitely think it still helps to have the billboard, especially if you can take it to the next step. So there was a review we wrote, and this was one instance that I know of that where because we had the AIO, we saw traffic go up, and it was because the AIO gave a very generic sort of answer, and our title tag was like very like that's not the whole answer. You need to come click on us to check out the rest of it. And so and we also had a really cool thumbnail. And so we've been treating title tags and thumbnails and meta descriptions almost like how people do it on YouTube to try and get that impression CTR rate up, which we've seen some success in. But I think if it's a user searching how to write a check, they probably don't need to go any further than that. And I don't even think you need to be the billboard for that.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Next one, crystal ball. Tell me how you think AI search will impact personal finance vertical in the next 18 months.
So I think for the really big guys, because of AI, I think we're going to see product parity across the board. I think every app is going to do everything. So it's going to become a war of who offers the stronger incentives and who has the better brand preference. And then based on where people are flocking to and what people are recommending online, that's going to influence where they show up in AI search. For the small and medium sized publishers, I think we're going to see greater specialization. And I think they're going to stop trying to do every like finance niche, and they're going to really consolidate down to one or two and try and do those as best they can and really own that corner of the world in personal finance.
And with the kind of caveat of being 18 months, do you feel it's going to be more of an amplification of what we're seeing today? Or are we kind of just like, yeah, the next chapter is going to come, within that time frame?
I think the next chapter will come within that time frame. So between when Google first announced AIOs and when they rolled it out everywhere in the US, I think it was May to May or March to March. So it was exactly 1 year. And now we're already seeing at the bottom of AIO overviews, there's a button that's like dive deeper in AI mode. And I think, I would imagine it's going to be around 12 to 18 months before that becomes the default search experience. They just need to crack how to monetize it with ads. And when that happens, I think if you're not prepared and you haven't made the shift yet, it could be a really dark day for you. Darker than the last few years have been for sure.
Which the point on paid, I think, is a really critical one because it's like that is, one of those limiting factors. If you think of Google as the business, and it's like when that is cracked, there's going to be a kind of like faster movement kind of change.
Without a doubt. It's the cash cow. Advertising is their cash cow. They're not going to throw it away, but the second they realize they're not going to leave it, it's not going anywhere. That's when they'll hit the switch, I think. Yeah.
Okay, next one, toss up. So this is going to be kind of would you rather, like which side you want to go. Would you choose to invest in long form financial guides or interactive calculators if you had limited resources for personal finance sites? And I think the interesting piece of this question is one is inherently going to have potential LLM opportunities, or one is going to be more within the site. So given the limited resources, which direction do you go?
Interactive calculators all the way. Yeah. I think the long form financial guides are going to, if it's a trade-off, interactive calculators. You can still add content to surround your calculator and to give it color and life, but chat-based interface is not a replacement for something someone can play with and change. Sure, an LLM can do calculations for you, but every time you want to do a new calculation, you have to reprompt it instead of just clicking a few buttons like you would on a regular calculator. I think tools that are efficient and intuitive are really going to win with users. That's another limiting factor of LLMs, is that it is very chat-based at the moment. So if you can create something that people can touch and manipulate in real time, typing is not the only way users, people in general like to communicate. There's many forms of communication, and I think offering them a new, mode of but basically giving them something they can touch with their own hands. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like it really comes back to some of your previous points on value. It's like a calculator in nature is going to give something very specific to their situation, in which case I would assume you're going to have more value derived from it, where the long form, it's that kind of moonshot of like, maybe it hits, maybe it doesn't. But it's like, it's less specific, I guess.
Right. And I'll also say, whenever I think about long form content, is that really how people use the internet when they're like doing searches, or are they scanning for very specific pieces of information? That's something I think about a lot, is that you tend to see very prose heavy resources online, and it's just like, if that person searched best travel credit card or whatever it is, they are not looking to read the next Moby Dick. They just want to see like which card gives you the most bang for your buck on the points. And so I think calculators are much more obvious in the way that they meet intent. If someone types in calculator and you give them a calculator, boom, you're done. Whereas a long form thing, you're trying to like hit every like which query, and you might always do that correctly.
Great point. Last question. This one I'm actually going to go off script, so I'm going to throw an audible at you. Game plan. You're the GM of an organization, and you're needing to realign the organization of how they look at search, and you're trying to broaden their perspective of it. What's your game plan to align all of the stakeholders within your team into how they should look at search?
I think I would get everyone in a room. I would ask how they're currently using search, and ask them to be real with themselves on if they're clicking into articles or if the LLM is sufficient enough for their needs in most cases. And hopefully the answers you get from that frame how to move forward. I think going back to what we were talking about earlier, let's start thinking like humans again and not like people trying to solve a puzzle. What do you want and how would you want to have this information communicated to you is going to be the answer in many cases for what to do next. I think if you're someone who has TikTok and gets lost on it for 4 hours a day when you should be going to sleep, then you know that you get information from TikTok in that way. Or if you're someone who only uses YouTube or for like movie reviews and breakdowns, then you need to be on YouTube. And so I would say throw out the old playbook for the most part. Stuff still matters, technical SEO, all that, whatever. But this is a chance to start fresh and put the customer front and center again.
All right, so that wraps up this episode of the Voice of Search podcast. Thanks to Zach Ali from Finder for joining us. If you'd like to contact Zach, you can find a link to his LinkedIn profile in the show notes, or go on over to his company's website at finder.com. If you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream of SEO and content marketing knowledge in your podcast feed, hit that subscribe button in your podcast app or on YouTube, and we'll be back in your feed soon. With that, that's all for today. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you in the next episode.